Some content creators suggested there were hidden connections. Others argued the internet was creating guilt by association. Still others claimed that ordinary celebrity networking was being transformed into conspiracy theories. The debate quickly became heated. And according to commentators, that's because people weren't really arguing about photographs or social events. They were arguing about trust. Who deserves it? Who loses it? And what happens after it's gone? Police cars' revolving light. What makes this story especially complicated is that Hollywood has always been built around relationships. Actors know producers. Producers know executives. Executives know media figures. Media figures know politicians. The same names often appear at the same events for years. That's not unusual. What's unusual is what happens when one person from those circles becomes infamous. Suddenly everyone connected to them faces questions. Fairly or unfairly? That's exactly what happened after Maxwell's downfall. High voltage sign. According to analysts, this explains why so many celebrity names ended up trending alongside Maxwell's. The public wasn't necessarily reacting to evidence. They were reacting to uncertainty. And uncertainty creates curiosity. Curiosity creates theories. And theories spread faster than facts online. That's one reason discussions surrounding Ellen became so intense. Not because definitive new information appeared. Because people were trying to make sense of a much larger story. A story involving power, influence, access, and elite social circles. Fire. But according to many observers, the most interesting part of the entire discussion wasn't Ellen. It was the growing belief that some Hollywood insiders had been quietly questioning certain celebrity images for years. And that brings the story back to Rosie O'Donnell. Because according to commentators, Rose's long-running criticism suddenly looked very different once public opinion started changing. For years, whenever Rosie O'Donnell criticized Ellen DeGeneres, many people brushed it off as celebrity drama. A feud. A personality clash. Just another Hollywood disagreement. Nothing more. At least that's what most people believed at the time. Eyes fire. After all, Ellen's public image seemed almost impossible to challenge. She had one of the most successful daytime television shows in history. Celebrities lined up to appear on her program. Politicians wanted interviews with her. Brands wanted partnerships with her. The audience loved her. In many ways, Ellen had become bigger than a television host. She had become a cultural institution. Police cars' revolving light. That's why Rose's criticism often sounded strange to outsiders. Why would someone question one of the most beloved personalities in entertainment? Why would someone push back against a person whose entire brand revolved around kindness? Many fans simply assumed Rosie was being unfair. And for a long time, that assumption worked. Because public perception remained firmly on Ellen's side. Until it didn't. High voltage sign. Once workplace allegations surrounding Ellen's show became major news, something unexpected happened. People started revisiting old interviews. Old statements. Old stories. Old disagreements. Suddenly, comments that once sounded bitter started sounding different. Not necessarily because they were proven correct, but because the context had changed. That's what happens when public opinion shifts. People don't just reevaluate the present. They reevaluate the past. Fire. According to observers, this is why Rose's name kept resurfacing online. Not because she had special insider knowledge. Not because she predicted future events. But because she had publicly expressed skepticism long before skepticism became popular. And that gave her comments a completely different weight. A comment ignored in one era can become significant in another. especially when new information changes how people interpret it. Eyes? Many internet users started asking themselves a simple question. If people were wrong about Ellen's public image for years, what else might they have been wrong about? That question fueled an enormous amount of online speculation. Sometimes reasonable speculation. Sometimes wildly exaggerated speculation. But speculation nonetheless. And according to commentators, that's when the conversation expanded far beyond Ellen herself. People began questioning how celebrity branding works, how images are created, how reputations are protected, and how much audiences truly know about public figures. Police cars' revolving light. The reality is that celebrity culture often depends on carefully managed narratives. Fans see interviews, public appearances, award speeches, social media posts. What they rarely see are the thousands of interactions happening behind closed doors. That's why image and reality can sometimes look very different. Not because celebrities are necessarily hiding secrets, but because public figures only reveal part of their lives. The public fills in the rest. High voltage sign. This idea became central to discussions about Ellen. Many observers argued that audiences had confused a television persona with a complete understanding of a person. Others argued that public expectations had simply become unrealistic. Either way, the debate grew larger than Ellen herself. It became a conversation about authenticity. Who is genuine? Who is performing? And can audiences ever really know the difference? Fire. That's where Rose's criticism suddenly gained relevance again. Not because it solved those questions, because it represented an early challenge to assumptions people had accepted without question. And once assumptions start breaking apart, people begin searching for more examples, more contradictions, more inconsistencies, more stories they may have overlooked. According to observers, that's exactly what happened across social media. The internet became obsessed with looking backward, searching for clues, searching for patterns, searching for signs that people had missed something important. Whether those searches produced meaningful answers is another matter entirely. But the curiosity became impossible to ignore. Eyes? And according to commentators, that curiosity eventually collided with one of the most controversial names in modern celebrity culture. Ghislaine Maxwell. Because as people searched for hidden truths inside Hollywood's elite circles, many started asking an even bigger question. Not about Ellen, not about Rosie, but about the powerful networks connecting influential people behind the scenes. And according to online investigators, that's where the story becomes far more complicated than anyone expected. At this point, the discussion stopped being about Ellen DeGeneres. It stopped being about Rosie O'Donnell. And it stopped being about one controversy. Instead, internet investigators became obsessed with something much bigger. Power, influence, and the mysterious social networks connecting some of the world's most famous people. Eyes fire. According to commentators, whenever a major public scandal erupts, people immediately start looking beyond the individuals directly involved. They begin asking broader questions. Who knew whom? Who attended which events? Who appeared in photographs together? Who moved in the same social circles? Those questions often produce enormous amounts of speculation, much more speculation than actual evidence. Police cars' revolving light. That is exactly what happened after Ghislaine Maxwell became one of the most discussed names in the world. Suddenly, social media users started examining years of celebrity photographs, award shows, charity galas, fundraisers, private parties, industry gatherings. Every image became a clue. Or at least people treated it like one. Warning sign # The important reality is that appearing in the same room as someone, attending the same event, or being photographed together does not prove wrongdoing. Public figures frequently move. A photograph is evidence that two people were in the same place. It is not evidence of criminal behavior. A friendship is evidence of a relationship. It is not evidence of participation in wrongdoing. Those distinctions matter. Unfortunately, they often disappear during viral discussions. Fire. This is where Ellen DeGeneres kept reappearing in online conversations. Not because investigators produced major public evidence against her. Not because authorities accused her of crimes. But because people were already re-examining her reputation after the workplace controversy. Once public trust weakens, every old photograph suddenly attracts attention. Every social connection becomes interesting. Every coincidence becomes a theory. And according to commentators, that process fueled an endless cycle of speculation. Eyes? The situation revealed something fascinating about modern internet culture. People don't just want answers. They want complete explanations. They want to understand how powerful systems operate, how influence works, how elite networks function. And when those explanations don't exist, many people start creating their own. That's where conspiracy theories often emerge. Not from certainty. From uncertainty. The desire to connect dots, even when some dots may not actually belong together. Police cars' revolving light. Many analysts believe this explains why discussions about Hollywood power structures became so intense. The public wasn't only interested in Maxwell. The public was interested in the entire environment surrounding Maxwell. The people. The events. The relationships. The institutions. Everything. And according to observers, that curiosity created one of the largest waves of online investigation in recent memory. Some findings were legitimate. Some were misleading. Some were completely false. But all of them generated attention. High voltage sign. Perhaps the most revealing part of the story is how quickly speculation can become accepted as fact online. One person makes a claim. Another repeats it. A third person presents it as established truth. Before long, thousands of people believe something without ever verifying where it originated. That's why media experts consistently urge caution when discussing celebrity theories. Especially theories built primarily on association rather than evidence. Because once a narrative spreads, correcting it becomes incredibly difficult. Fire. Yet despite all those warnings, interest continued growing. Why? Because people remained fascinated by one question. What really happens behind the scenes among the most powerful people in entertainment? That question keeps driving investigations. Keeps driving documentaries. Keeps driving online discussions. And according to commentators, it isn't going away anytime soon. But as the internet continued digging into elite circles, another surprising development occurred. People started comparing different public personalities. Different reputations. Different controversies. And one comparison kept appearing over and over again. Rosie O'Donnell versus Ellen DeGeneres. Because according to many observers, the contrast between those two women may explain why this story continues generating attention years later. As the years passed, something strange happened. The discussion stopped being about one person. Instead, it became a comparison. A comparison between Rosie O'Donnell and Ellen DeGeneres. And according to commentators, that comparison may be one of the biggest reasons this story continues generating attention today. Eyes fire. At first glance, the two women seemed remarkably similar. Both became hugely successful daytime television hosts. Both built loyal audiences. Both became household names. Both achieved enormous influence in entertainment. And both were viewed as groundbreaking figures in television history. But according to many observers, their public images couldn't have been more different. Police cars revolving light. For years, Ellen's brand centered around kindness, positivity, generosity, joy. Everything about her public image reinforced those ideas. Her famous sign-off encouraged people to be kind. Her show featured giveaways, feel-good stories, surprise moments. The image was carefully crafted and incredibly successful. Millions of viewers embraced it. High voltage sign. Rosie, meanwhile, projected something different. More direct. More outspoken. More confrontational. More willing to challenge people publicly. Some fans loved that honesty. Others found it polarizing. But according to commentators, very few people ever accused Rosie of hiding her personality. What viewers saw generally matched what they expected. And that's where the comparison became fascinating. Because after Ellen's workplace controversy exploded, many internet users started asking a simple question. Which image felt more authentic? Fire. Suddenly, old interviews resurfaced. Old clips resurfaced. Old disagreements resurfaced. People began comparing years of public behavior. Years of media appearances. Years of comments from people who had interacted with both women. And according to observers, the internet became obsessed with the contrast. Not because it proved anything. Because it highlighted how powerful public perception can be. Eyes. Many analysts argue that audiences often prefer authenticity over perfection. Perfection creates expectations. Authenticity creates trust. When someone presents themselves as flawless, any contradiction feels shocking. When someone presents themselves as imperfect, contradictions feel less surprising. That's one reason the backlash against Ellen became so intense. The controversy didn't just challenge her behavior. It challenged her brand. And brands are powerful things. Especially in Hollywood. Police cars revolving light. According to commentators, Rosie's supporters frequently point to this difference. They argue that Rosie never tried to be universally loved. She never tried to present herself as perfect. She was outspoken. Sometimes controversial. Sometimes divisive. But generally consistent. Whether people agreed with her or not, they felt they knew who she was. That's a valuable asset in modern media. Especially during periods of public scrutiny. High voltage sign. Of course, critics of this comparison argue that it's overly simplistic. Public figures are complicated. Personalities are complicated. Human beings are complicated. Reducing anyone to a simple narrative rarely tells the full story. And that's fair. But the internet rarely rewards nuance. The internet rewards contrasts. Heroes versus villains. Authentic versus fake. Truth versus deception. Those narratives spread quickly because they are easy to understand. Even when reality is far more complicated. Fire. What makes the Rosie Ellen debate especially interesting is that it reflects a larger cultural shift. People increasingly question celebrity branding. They increasingly question public personas. They increasingly question carefully managed images. Audiences today are far more skeptical than audiences 20 years ago. And according to observers, that's why old comments from Rosie suddenly gained renewed attention. Not because they solved every mystery. Because they fit a new cultural mood. A mood built around questioning assumptions. Questioning narratives. Questioning appearances. Eyes. That's also why discussions involving Ghislaine Maxwell, Hollywood networks, and celebrity relationships became intertwined with the debate. People weren't simply investigating individuals. They were investigating systems. They were asking whether powerful public images sometimes hide more complicated realities. It's a question that appears again and again whenever major scandals emerge. And it's a question that continues driving enormous online engagement. Police cars' revolving light. Perhaps the biggest lesson from the Rosie versus Ellen comparison is that reputation can change astonishingly fast. Years to build. Months to damage. Sometimes days. That's why public figures spend so much effort protecting their image. Because once trust begins cracking, every old story gets revisited. Every old comment gets reconsidered. Every old criticism gets a second look. And according to commentators, that's exactly what happened here. But according to observers, the final chapter of this story isn't really about Rosie. And it isn't really about Ellen. It's about something much larger. The public's growing obsession with uncovering what they believe is hidden behind celebrity power. And according to analysts, that's why this conversation shows no signs of ending. After years of scandals, years of celebrity controversies, years of shocking revelations that nobody saw coming, many people have reached a simple conclusion. They no longer automatically believe the image. They want to know what's behind it. Eyes fire. And according to commentators, that's the real reason stories involving Ellen DeGeneres, Rosie O'Donnell, and discussions surrounding Ghislaine Maxwell continue attracting attention years later. Because these stories aren't really about individual celebrities anymore. They are about trust. And once trust becomes the issue, everything changes. Police cars' revolving light. For decades, Hollywood operated on a relatively simple formula. Studios created stars. Publicists protected reputations. Media outlets promoted carefully managed narratives. Audiences consumed the finished product. Most people accepted what they were shown. But according to analysts, the internet completely changed that system. Today, audiences investigate. They compare interviews. They search old clips. They analyze contradictions. They challenge narratives. And sometimes they discover things that traditional media overlooked. Other times they simply create new theories. Either way, the relationship between celebrities and the public has changed forever. High voltage sign. That's why the downfall of carefully crafted public images has become such a major cultural phenomenon. When a celebrity's reputation collapses today, people don't just react to the new controversy. They immediately revisit everything. Every interview. Every appearance. Every friendship. Every criticism. Every rumor. Nothing escapes re-examination. And according to observers, that's exactly what happened with Ellen. The workplace controversy didn't just damage her reputation. It triggered a complete review of her public image. Suddenly, people started asking questions they never asked before. Questions about authenticity. Questions about power. Questions about what audiences really knew. Fire. This is also why Rosie O'Donnell's comments became relevant again. Not because Rosie solved some giant mystery. Not because she possessed secret information. But because she represented something increasingly rare in modern celebrity culture. A public figure willing to challenge a popular narrative. And once the narrative began cracking, people naturally revisited those challenges. That's human nature. We look backward when trying to understand the present. Eyes. The internet has amplified this tendency dramatically. Today, old interviews never disappear. Old statements never disappear. Old controversies never disappear. Everything remains searchable. Everything remains accessible. Everything remains available for reinterpretation. That's why modern reputation crises often feel larger than those of previous generations. The evidence, whether meaningful or meaningless, is always available. And people are always looking. Police cars' revolving light. What makes this trend especially powerful is that it extends far beyond Hollywood. Politics, business, sports, media. The same pattern appears everywhere. People increasingly distrust polished images. They increasingly prefer authenticity. Or at least what they perceive as authenticity. That's one reason celebrity culture feels so different today than it did 20 years ago. Audiences no longer want perfection. They want transparency. And when transparency appears absent, suspicion often fills the gap. High voltage sign. Of course, there's also a danger here. A very real danger.